I met Shannon in college during our sophomore year, and we instantly hit it off. She was beautiful, with thick brown hair, blue eyes, and a fit body, but it was her vibrant personality that really drew me in. Smart, cheerful, and funny, she quickly became my best friend. After 3 months of growing close, we shared a memorable moment in my car behind the baseball stadium. It was a bit clumsy, but it was beautiful, and when we finally connected, she cried tears of happiness. From that moment, I knew we were meant to be together. My name is Stu, and I'm a contractor from a small Midwestern town. Standing at 6 feet tall and weighing 187 pounds, I have brown eyes and sandy hair. I run a successful remodeling business, while Shannon teaches music at a local high school. Together, we are financially stable, and we're excited about starting a family soon. Our first decade of marriage was blissful. Our sex life was fulfilling, though not daily, and we had a rule to cuddle every night. Waking up next to Shannon was always a joy. I'd give anything for her without hesitation, but then something unexpected happened, something that left me emotionally shaken. Most of our work happens during the warmer months, so we took vacations during holidays and in the summer. Shannon occasionally visited family or kept up with teaching during my busy season. Our favorite winter getaway was always somewhere warm, and during a tough period in our marriage, we opted for a 2-week stay at an all-inclusive spa resort in the Bahamas, hoping to reconnect. Before boarding the plane, I had a nagging sense that something wasn't right. I had always believed our marriage was flawless, but a man's lingering stares at Shannon at the airport raised red flags. His familiarity with her made me uneasy. They didn't attempt further contact, but Shannon seemed completely oblivious to the tension. On the plane, the man ended up seated several rows ahead of us. Shannon, unusually, chose an aisle seat instead of her usual preference for the window. When I questioned her, she blamed it on a stomach issue. I managed to switch seats for her with a fellow passenger, citing her discomfort, but my gut churned with doubt. Normally, I sleep fine on planes, but my anxiety kept me awake during the flight from Minneapolis to Miami. Despite pretending to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As we stowed our belongings and the flight took off, I kept an eye on Shannon. About 15 minutes into the flight, she glanced at me, thinking I was asleep, and got up to go to the restroom. I observed her interactions with a man in the aisle, noting the brief touch of her hand on his shoulder, and their body language spoke volumes. His hand on her waist, her smile. It was clear they were familiar with each other. Realizing the danger to our marriage, I felt a wave of sadness. How could she betray us like this? I had never imagined she would cheat. Throughout the rest of the flight, I struggled to comprehend the situation, hoping that somehow it would all work itself out. But when we boarded our flight to Nassau, my fears were confirmed when I saw him again, 5 rows behind us, engrossed in his book. Shannon returned to her usual seat by the window, and everything seemed normal again. When we arrived in Nassau, we collected our bags, rented a car, and headed to the hotel. Shannon was absorbed in her phone, leaving me to wrestle with my emotions. "Who are you texting?" I asked. "Just my mom and sis, letting them know we arrived," she replied, avoiding eye contact. Suspicion grew in me like a snowball. Our room was stunning, with a view of the ocean and a pool. As we unpacked, I knew I had to make a move to win back my wife. I approached Shannon, hugged her, and kissed her neck. "You know how much I love you," I whispered. She kissed me back lightly, saying, "I love you too, baby." But her eyes seemed distant. I was crushed. "I'd never hurt you, Shannon, or our marriage," I added. She shuddered and replied, "I know." But her voice was hollow. I knew right then that if she hadn't strayed yet, she would soon. I released her and rushed to the bathroom, trying to gather my thoughts. How did this happen? What did I miss? Could I save us, or was it too late? I splashed my face, returning to find Shannon with a strange look on her face. "Stu, I got my period and forgot tampons," she said. "It just started, but this isn't normal. Maybe it's the excitement of the trip." "I'll get some," she added, leaving the room. At first, I thought it might slow her affair, but doubt crept in. This had never happened before. Was she lying to avoid closeness? The thought tore me apart. If it was true, she was not the woman I married. No one could be so cruel, letting me plan and pay for this trip just to betray me. I felt lost, like I was losing my mind. Who was this woman I had loved for over 10 years? As I spotted her phone by the TV, I grabbed it, finding no password change. My heart sank. I checked Shannon's messages with Anthony Eisner while I sat in the car, my heart sinking with each text I read. Anthony, hey hot, can't wait to have you. Shannon, you almost got us caught. Anthony, I almost kissed you on the plane. Shannon, Stu is asleep. I liked your squeeze. Anthony, I'm in the lobby. Is Stu acting weird? Shannon, he's good, but I need more. Anthony, when will you leave, Stu? Shannon, I'll make a baby. Anthony, I'll make you wet. Shannon, Stu won't touch me. I'll lie about my period. Anthony, he's so stupid. Shannon, don't call him that. Anthony, meet me in the lobby. Shannon, give me 5. I stood in shock, considering using the texts in a divorce, but then I decided against it. My phone held all my personal data, and since she started this mess, I thought it should be her responsibility to deal with it. I kept both phones, knowing she'd notice hers missing soon, but I'd be long gone by then. A rise in my throat made me vomit as I glanced at the beautiful Caribbean Sea, once the source of my happiness just hours ago. I had been preparing for a romantic 2-week vacation, but now my world had collapsed. Alone, shocked, and angry, I wanted revenge on them both. Divorce was certain, but I craved more. Looking out the window, I saw them kissing by the pool. Grabbing my camera, I recorded their actions, planning to use the footage later. It hit me. While they were planning to spend 2 weeks together, I could beat them to it. I needed to know how they planned to keep me occupied. I continued filming until they kissed again, and Shannon walked away. I returned to the bathroom, turning on the shower to calm down. If she asked, I'd say it helped me relax after the flight and rid myself of the airplane smell. 5 minutes later, I heard the door open. I'm back, she shouted. I brought water and tampons. I was suspicious. Why bring water when the resort provides it? It hit me. She planned to medicate me. I debated my options. If I refused the water, she'd suspect something. But if I drank it and she poisoned me, she and her lover would leave. I dried off and pondered my next move. I had to outsmart them. She knocked on the bathroom door, concerned. Was it for me or her date? Anger surged, but I composed myself. She handed me an open bottle of water. Stay hydrated, she said, avoiding eye contact. Pretending to drink, I discreetly emptied the bottle and refilled it in the bathroom. When I returned to the room, Shannon was unpacking, unaware of my ruse. I noticed a sexy dress in the bag. What's this for? I asked. She smiled and claimed she brought it for herself. I tried to hint at her deceit, asking, Aren't you tired? Pretending to feel drowsy, I said lazily, Yeah, I'm a bit tired. She suggested I rest, promising to wake me in a couple of hours for dinner. I reluctantly agreed. As she showered, I searched her purse and found unlabeled pills, which I pocketed. When she left for her date, I dressed quickly, formulating a plan. My agenda: gather more substantial video evidence, throw a wrench into their plans, and cut the trip short to initiate divorce proceedings. I couldn't let Shannon sabotage our finances or make other moves against me. After hastily dressing, I grabbed my camera and hurried out of the room, heading to the bar. I found a spot behind some palm trees where I could observe them while remaining concealed. My heart burned with rage and betrayal as I watched Shannon, dressed in the provocative red dress I once adored, wrapped in the arms of another man. Every ounce of self-restraint kept me from storming over and confronting them. My goal was to gather evidence, not to risk a scene that could land me in trouble. I captured their every interaction, each kiss, caress, and shared laugh, feeling deep anguish as I watched my wife behaving so intimately with another man. As the hours passed, my resolve began to waver, and I considered retreating back to our room, now mine alone. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed them departing the dance floor with a sense of urgency. My curiosity piqued. What were they up to now? I discreetly followed them, maintaining a safe distance to avoid being detected. Along the way, they paused intermittently, stealing affectionate moments, while I diligently recorded their every move. Eventually, They arrived at his modest room, situated away from the ocean view, a stark contrast to the luxury Shannon and I had shared during our stay. I positioned myself just outside, peering through the partially drawn curtains, trying to catch snippets of their conversation. My camera captured every word exchanged between them, even though my heart ached with every passing second. Despite the pain gnawing at me, I remained steadfast, knowing that the evidence I was gathering would be crucial in the days to come. As they undressed, I couldn't help but notice the man's impressive physique. It wasn't a justification for her betrayal or for the realization that she had let him father a child, but it made me feel like I was losing my grip on everything. I lingered outside, recording their passionate encounter, which seemed to stretch on endlessly. The anger inside me grew as I watched them, unable to tear my eyes away. Not only was he well endowed, but he also displayed remarkable stamina. Around midnight, I overheard their unsettling conversation. Shannon was concerned about the pills she'd given me and asked Anthony about their safety. He reassured her that I'd sleep for hours without issue and even proposed a plan to prolong our separation. Their callous laughter filled me with an overwhelming sense of fury. Having seen and heard enough, I retreated to our room, consumed by my desire for revenge. I was determined to disrupt their little rendezvous, but I needed to act carefully. I began to devise a plan. The first step was to lure Shannon away from him for a while. I thought of booking her a spa day, masking my true intentions with false affection. It was deceitful, but I believed it was necessary to deliver the justice they both deserved. If she hesitated, I'd remind her that the spa package was non-refundable, invoking guilt to make sure she accepted it, just like she had pressured me in the past. Once Shannon was occupied, I could confront Anthony alone. I could already feel the surge of anger within me, but I knew this was the best way to handle things without immediately losing control. At 5 a.m., Shannon quietly returned and slipped into bed next to me. I suppressed the urge to push her away and feigned sleep, waiting for the perfect moment to act. By 7 a.m., as she slumbered, I got up, quickly showered, and set out to book the spa appointment. Arriving at the spa, I booked the earliest slot for a 3-hour session. It would be enough to keep her busy while I dealt with Anthony and put my plan into motion. I returned to the hotel room around 9 a.m., where I found Shannon still asleep. I quietly searched through her purse, locating her phone. As I scrolled through her messages, I found one from Anthony sent within the last hour. It read, "You were great last night. Any chance you could escape Stu for some afternoon fun?" The anger within me flared, but I managed to keep it under control. I knew the end was near, and Shannon's betrayal was about to come to light. As she stirred, I replaced her phone and gently kissed her forehead. "Good morning, sleepyhead," I said softly. "I'm sorry about yesterday for falling asleep so suddenly and ruining our dinner plans, but I have a surprise for you." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Shannon's face as she smiled and yawned. "What kind of surprise?" she asked. I gave her a reassuring smile. "I booked you a spa day as an apology for last night and to show you how much I love you." Even in my drowsy state, I noticed her slight shudder. It dawned on me that she had doubts about our relationship. "Everything's fine, isn't it?" I probed gently. "Or don't you like my gift?" She hesitated before nodding and offering a faint smile. "Oh, no, I like it," she reassured me, though her smile faltered slightly. I pressed on. "I just wish you had asked me first. If I had done that, it wouldn't have come as much of a surprise to you." She nodded in agreement and expressed her gratitude for my thoughtfulness. After she got up and headed to the bathroom, I glanced out the window and spotted Anthony by the pool, talking to 2 young women. Although I suspected Shannon had informed him about my surprise, he didn't seem concerned. It struck me that Anthony might have contingency plans in case Shannon couldn't join him for some afternoon fun. About an hour later, Shannon and I were at the buffet, filling our plates. I asked her, "Feeling hungry, babe?" She opted for just fruit and coffee. "Is it because of your period?" I asked, trying to make light of her unease. "Yeah, that might be it," she replied, visibly distracted. Her reaction to Anthony's message sparked my curiosity, but it didn't matter much. My plans were working, and I could feel her emotional distance growing. After breakfast, we decided to take a stroll along the beach. I brought my camera along and captured shots of the palm trees and of Shannon. Despite my compliments, she seemed uneasy, hinting at a growing sense of guilt. "What's wrong, babe? Are you okay?" I asked, gently probing for an answer. I probed, sensing Shannon's discomfort. "No, I'm fine, just a bit tired," she responded, her guilt becoming more evident with each word. I knew something wasn't right, but I played it off. "Sure, no problem," I said. "I understand. It's not ideal to have your period start during vacation," I reassured her, concealing my growing frustration. As she walked away without so much as a goodbye kiss, I resolved that I would confront Anthony soon. I continued walking along the beach, lost in thought, when I unexpectedly encountered two couples. One of the women was someone I'd seen with Anthony earlier. She was now accompanied by two burly men who seemed imposing. Overhearing their conversation, it became clear that Anthony had convinced them to go deep-sea fishing, leaving the women feeling neglected. Despite their attempts to reassure them, the women felt unappreciated, and it was evident that Anthony had won the argument. Watching them pass by, I realized how manipulative he had been, using his charm to control the situation. After strolling along the beach for a bit, I decided to head back and check on Anthony. I was worried that Shannon might have ditched her spa appointment to be with him, but if that was the case, maybe I could gather more footage of them together. I roamed the hotel grounds for over an hour until I found myself standing outside Anthony's room. I could hear voices inside, but Shannon's wasn't among them. Carefully, I readied my camera and crept closer to the window. It was risky since it was daytime, and more people could spot me, so I decided the best move would be to mount the camera outside on the windowsill, pointing into the room, and let it roll. After setting up the camera, I found a spot to observe his door, waiting to see who would emerge. Time dragged on, but my patience eventually paid off. The two women I had seen earlier came out of his room, all smiles and giggles, as if they shared some juicy secret. It was like watching a bad adult movie unfold in real life. Once they were gone, I retrieved my camera and headed back to my room. Shannon wouldn't be back from her spa session for another hour, so I had time to review the footage. Back in my room, I transferred all the videos I had taken since we arrived. Most were of Shannon and Anthony, but then I watched the footage of the two women in his room. Turns out they had found a way to kill time while their partners were out deep-sea fishing. Anthony had convinced them to join him in a menage a trois. It was like something out of a low-budget adult flick. He had his way with one while the other watched, and then they switched. That's when a new idea struck me. I could time everything just right to bail out while Shannon was still piecing together what had happened. I figured she'd likely try to medicate me tonight to make me look like a fool again, but if I played my cards right, she'd end up meeting Anthony at the bar, drinking and dancing, before heading back to his room. I could slip a pill into their drinks toward the end of the night, and they'd be out cold by the time they reached his room. Timing had to be flawless, but in life, plans hardly ever go off without a hitch. The next step in my plan was to make a DVR copy of Anthony's recent conquests. I must admit, I was somewhat amazed at his ability to charm two very attractive women into his room. With multiple DVR discs on hand, I duplicated his escapades from the day, just in case I needed more leverage later. I also duplicated all my previous recordings onto another DVR for added insurance. Heading to the front desk, I arranged for one disc to be sent to my brother Frank's home with a note urging him not to play it or reveal its origin. This would serve as a safeguard in case my plan failed, or if Shannon and Anthony caught wind of my scheme and tried to retaliate. At least the disc I sent to my brother would expose their actions if they tried anything. Glancing at the time, I noticed Shannon was nearing the end of her spa treatment, so I decided to quickly scope out the hotel. I aimed to locate the rooms of the two women and their boyfriends. Surely, their partners would be curious about their activities while they were out fishing. I eventually spotted the women emerging from the pool with towels and followed them, discovering that their rooms were conveniently adjacent to each other. This resolved one aspect of my plan. If everything went according to schedule, and Shannon and Anthony repeated their routine, I would be able to disrupt the remainder of their trip by tomorrow morning. Returning to my room, I called the airline to inquire about the earliest flight. Unfortunately, the earliest available flight was at 10 a.m., later than I had hoped, but I booked it nonetheless. I then informed the front desk that my wife and I Had to depart the following morning due to a sudden emergency at home. Checking out at 8 a.m., the hotel staff expressed sympathy and wished me well. I thanked them before heading back to the room. I was fully committed to my plan, no matter what obstacles arose. If things didn't go as I envisioned, I could still catch a plane in the morning and beat Shannon home. At least I could spoil everything for her before her arrival, but if by some miracle everything fell into place, according to my scheme, she'd be stranded here for days, maybe even weeks, giving me ample time to wreak havoc in her life. The plan was straightforward. First, I'd let Shannon believe she had medicated me to fight sleep, so she and Anthony could enjoy their evening together. Second, I'd return to the bar, observing and biding my time to spike their drinks with whatever substance Shannon had attempted on me. If I timed it perfectly, they'd pass out just before reaching his room or immediately upon arrival. Timing was crucial. Third, once they were in the room, I'd intervene, escort Shannon back to our room, and then thoroughly strip Anthony of his belongings. I'd grab his wallet, cash, passport, credit cards, clothes, everything he brought. Then, I'd find the rooms of the two women Anthony had been with earlier and discreetly slip the DVR drives under their doors, hoping one of their boyfriends would discover them first and view the footage. I was certain they wouldn't be pleased with their girlfriend's activities in their absence. Anthony's license plate would be clearly visible on the video, ensuring they'd have no trouble tracking him down. Fifth, I'd treat Shannon the same way I did Anthony. I'd strip her of all her belongings, except for her clothes and a purse, leaving a note in her empty wallet to assign blame. With everything set, all I could do now was wait for the players to make their moves. Shannon returned to our room at 5:30 in the evening, looking more serene and radiant than ever. It pained me to consider how she had ended our marriage, knowing I'd never have her beauty by my side again. "Stu, thank you so much for the spa day. It was incredible. I feel like a whole new person," she exclaimed, glowing with satisfaction. I forced a smile. "I'm thrilled you enjoyed it. Initially, you didn't seem too keen when I suggested it, but now I'm glad you did. I just wanted to show you how much you mean to me," I replied, noticing the glint of tears in her eyes. "Thanks again. I really enjoyed it. And I love you," she said, this time with more conviction and emotion. "Anytime, baby," I said, though my words felt hollow. "We've got dinner reservations. How about we rest up and then get ready?" I suggested. She nodded and headed to the bathroom, taking her purse along. A few minutes later, she emerged with 2 bottles of water, handing one to me. "Here, drink up. I want to go dancing tonight, so you better start hydrating now," she said with a wink. All right. Let me hit the bathroom first," I chuckled. Once inside, I went through the familiar routine, emptying the bottle and refilling it with water from the counter. I flushed the toilet to make it sound like I was occupied before returning to the bedroom, continuing to sip water. After 15 minutes, I began to feign sleep, snoring lightly as I watched Shannon prepare for her evening with Anthony. Unbeknownst to her, she headed to the bathroom and started the shower. Seizing the opportunity, I swiftly retrieved her phone to check her messages. "Shannon, I can't leave this afternoon. Stu got me a spa package I couldn't refuse," Anthony's message read. "No problem, baby. I've got other plans. Are we still on for tonight?" Shannon responded, "Oh yeah, can't wait to be with you." Anthony's eagerness and Shannon's betrayal ignited my anger, but I knew the end was near. Now, all I had to do was tail them to the bar, observe their dance routine for a few hours, and then easily spike their drinks, or so I hoped. I searched through Shannon's purse and found Anthony's room keycard, pocketing it before neatly arranging everything back. Shannon took a bit longer to get ready than usual, then did something entirely unexpected. She sat beside me on the bed and gently caressed my cheek. "Baby, after this week, I'll be all yours. I promise. I just needed to clear my head before we start a family. I'm sorry I couldn't confide in you, but I had to do this. The next few days are for me. I couldn't risk telling you, knowing you'd leave me, but I need you more than ever. I love you deeply, but I have to do this," she confessed. Then she leaned in, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "I love you so much, Stu." Initially, I thought she had realized I was awake, but then I understood she was trying to ease her own guilt. However, it was too late for that. Soon, she was fully dressed and walked out the door. As soon as it closed behind her, I sprang out of bed, got dressed, and followed closely behind. They found themselves once again in the same bar as the night before. It was busier than last night, and I even spotted the two women and their boyfriends from the beach. If my plan succeeded, they wouldn't be together the next morning. I found myself in the same spot as the previous evening, settled in, and began recording the events with my trusty camera. The night unfolded as expected. Shannon and Anthony quickly found their seats at a table, laughing and chatting. As the hour grew late, I realized it was time to medicate their drinks with sleeping pills. I made my way to the bar, ensuring they didn't notice me. Finding an empty seat near where the waitstaff prepared drinks, I ordered a beer, keeping a watchful eye on them. I noticed a waitress taking their order and promptly relaying it to the bartender. I seized the opportunity, calling over another bartender to order the same drinks. As the first bartender turned away to fulfill the order, I discreetly opened a capsule and poured its contents into both drinks, stirring to dissolve the powder. It fizzled slightly but blended seamlessly with the glass in each hand. Moving swiftly, I maneuvered past the waitress, making sure to shield the exchange from view. Thankfully, the crowded bar offered ample cover, and my actions went unnoticed. I distanced myself from the bar to give the waitress a chance to deliver the drinks to the couple. After a few minutes, I returned to my observation spot, anxiously watching as the waitress served them their drinks. I waited, hoping my timing was perfect. It was just after midnight, so if the medication worked as planned, they'd remain unconscious until about 11 in the morning. It'd be ideal if they made it to Anthony's room before passing out, but I began to feel a creeping doubt. What if they didn't finish their drinks? Would there be enough medication to produce the desired effect? Then, Anthony leaned in and whispered something to Shannon. She smiled, and they hastily downed the remaining drinks before quickly leaving the bar. Thank goodness, I was able to keep pace with them. Their hurried pace indicated their urgency to return to his room. As I trailed behind them, I noticed Shannon beginning to stumble, struggling to maintain her balance. Anthony supported her by draping her arm over his neck, helping her walk. By the time they reached his room, Anthony too was unsteady, stumbling more with each step. I had timed everything perfectly. When they reached his door, Shannon could barely stand, and Anthony was staggering, fumbling with the key card. After several unsuccessful attempts, he managed to open the door and stumbled inside. I waited a few minutes, then retrieved the key card from Shannon's purse and entered the room. As I stepped inside, I heard Anthony muttering, "What's wrong with you, baby? You didn't drink that much." His slurred speech told me he would be out soon. Inside, Shannon lay face down on the bed, already in a deep sleep. Anthony shook her, attempting to rouse her. "Come on, baby, it's time to have some fun," he mumbled, then noticed me standing there. "Hey, who are you?" he slurred, trying to stand up straight but nearly falling. "Just her husband, the fool," I retorted. "Now be a good boy and pass out so I can get her out of here." On cue, he collapsed to the floor, motionless. Approaching the bed, I noticed his phone lying nearby. Curious, I picked it up and began scrolling through it. Most of the pictures were innocuous, but then I stumbled upon something more damning. He had a folder full of images of women in various stages of undress, some engaging in acts of self-pleasure. Most of the women were unfamiliar to me, but I did come across a few undressed pictures of Shannon and others in similar acts. As I scrolled, I recognized some of the women as teachers from Shannon's school and the wives of several male colleagues. "Well, this is quite revealing," I muttered. It appeared Anthony had a penchant for affairs with married women. Things were about to take a nasty turn. I scrolled through his contact list and decided that aside from my soon-to-be ex-wife, these photos should be shared with everyone in his contacts, especially the husbands of the women in the photos. When he returns home, he's in for an unpleasant surprise. I forwarded the photos and videos of Shannon to her phone, then transferred them to mine for future use. Let's call it insurance. After powering down his phone, I gathered all of his belongings, clothes, toiletries, and other items he brought on the trip, and packed them into his suitcase. I rifled through his pockets, confiscating his cash, wallet, credit cards, driver's license, and passport. Without his passport, Leaving the island would be tricky for him. Once his suitcase was filled, I turned to Shannon, still lying face down on the bed with one leg hanging off. With care, I rolled her onto her back and carried her to our room. After laying her on our bed, I returned to Anthony's room to collect his remaining belongings. I kept his phone, wallet, and cash as compensation for the trouble he caused. I thoroughly inspected his room to ensure he left with nothing. I even removed his shoes. On my way back, I stumbled upon a hotel dumpster and tossed his suitcase and shoes inside, covering them with trash to conceal them. Returning to my room, I felt a mix of satisfaction and rage. Everything was falling into place, but my work wasn't done yet. I proceeded to pack my suitcase along with Shannon's belongings, treating her possessions with the same detachment as Anthony's. I intended to leave her with nothing but the clothes on her back, her purse, and a few necessary items like tampons, along with her empty wallet, containing only the note I left behind. As I finished up, I noticed the time. It was already past 4 a.m., and I needed to be at the airport by 9. Shannon had finished her drink around 2, so I knew she wouldn't wake up until at least noon. I anticipated Anthony's arrival around 10 a.m., ensuring I'd be long gone before either of them woke. There was still one last task on my agenda. Leaving the room, I grabbed the 2 DVR discs I had recorded earlier and made my way to the rooms of the 2 women and their partners. Stealthily and swiftly, I slipped a disc under each door before returning to my room. As I entered, I saw Shannon lying peacefully on the bed, a sense of loss and sadness overwhelming me. I had once yearned to start a family with her, but now it was clear that she had other plans, and forgiveness was beyond my reach. After ensuring everything was packed, I seized Shannon's suitcase and retraced my steps to the dumpster, where I disposed of her belongings alongside Anthony's. Back in the room, I meticulously searched Shannon's purse, confirming it was empty of money, credit cards, or a passport. I wanted her return home to be as difficult as possible, just like Anthony's would be. Collapsing into one of the chairs, exhaustion washed over me, but my mind raced with thoughts of my next steps. Upon returning home, my first move would be to drain our bank and debit accounts, then cancel all our credit cards. Next, I'd gather my belongings and vacate our house. I figured I'd need to rent a storage unit for my things, but I didn't care. I just wanted out of our house and this sham marriage. Before I knew it, I drifted off to sleep. When I woke, it was nearly 7 a.m. I rose from the chair, casting one last sorrowful glance at Shannon before carefully lifting her and carrying her out of the room. Down at the pool, I settled Shannon onto a lounge chair. Since I was checking out, I didn't want her in the room when housekeeping arrived to clean and prepare it for the next guests. Returning to my room, I grabbed my suitcases and double-checked to ensure I had everything. I still had Anthony's phone, but then an idea struck me. I went back to the pool, retrieved Shannon's phone, and began sending the photos and videos to everyone on her contact list. I made exceptions for her young nieces, but I was sure her parents, siblings, and colleagues would find the photos enlightening. At the front desk, I requested a piece of tape, which I used to cover the contacts on Shannon's phone battery, making it appear dead. I also made sure she didn't have a phone charging cord. Without money, it would take her a while to get the phone working. Just after 8 a.m., I heard commotion and shouting. It was one of the boyfriends of the women Anthony had been with yesterday, apparently now soon-to-be ex-boyfriends. Watch the video I slipped under their door. You're a traitor. Tell your family the wedding's off, and I never want to see you again. One guy yelled at his girlfriend. The other had a cold expression as his girlfriend pleaded with him. Baby, please don't leave me, she begged. I'm so sorry, it was a stupid mistake. You've already paid him back in full. You're a traitor. Go to your new boyfriend. He might have more money, but I doubt he'll be as forgiving, he replied coldly, sending shivers down my spine. I wondered what fate had befallen poor Anthony. Well, I suppose I'd never know. The next thing I heard was the ambulance siren halting in front of the building. The individual I assumed was the manager emerged from his office and swiftly escorted the orderlies down the path to Anthony's room. I sincerely hoped he was okay. As onlookers began to gather to investigate the commotion, I quietly hailed a taxi and headed to the airport. Upon switching on my phone, I noticed a voicemail. I accessed it and listened to a message from my brother, Frank. Stu, what's going on there? I've received a flood of undressed photos and detailed videos of Shannon. I mean, I know she's attractive, but what's the deal? Fill me in when you get this. Arriving at the airport and waiting to board the plane, I returned his call and briefed him on the entire situation, how Shannon had been involved with Anthony while we were away and her attempts to conceive with him. Initially shocked, my brother thought I was joking. However, after urging him to review the video closely, he expressed his sympathies and offered assistance if needed. After thanking him, I ended the call and soon found myself traveling home alone. Upon landing, I powered up Anthony's phone and found numerous voicemails and messages, many containing threats directed at him. It seemed the photos and videos I distributed weren't well received. Retrieving my luggage, I grabbed my car from long-term parking and drove home, brainstorming my next steps along the way. Although divorce was an option, I knew it would entail splitting our assets evenly, which didn't sit right with me. The idea that Shannon could cheat and still benefit from a divorce felt unjust. A new plan began to form in my mind as I drove home, and with each passing mile, I mentally outlined how I would execute it. Shannon had shattered our marriage, and now it was my turn to make her life miserable. I was resolved to ensure she returned to an empty home, one where she'd find nothing but consequences. Upon arriving, I contacted my brother to assist me in moving my belongings out of the house in the coming days. Everything I owned, I planned to take with me, ensuring Shannon came home to an empty space. I felt a dark satisfaction in the idea of leaving her with nothing. I checked my phone and saw there were over 20 voicemails and numerous text messages, mostly from Shannon's sister and other relatives asking about her whereabouts and why she hadn't responded. I felt a strange relief that none of those messages were from Shannon herself. She had likely been unable to turn on her phone, so she hadn't realized what had happened yet. The thought of her powering on her phone to be bombarded with messages about the photos and videos she'd unwittingly sent me made me chuckle. She was in for quite the rude awakening. The first thing I did was cancel all our credit cards and transfer the money from our joint bank account into my personal account. Then, I began gathering my clothes and personal items, deciding which gifts Shannon had given me over the years were worth keeping. Anything of sentimental value was either sold online or pawned. I made sure to turn off the home phone, redirecting all calls to my cell. It wasn't until nearly 11 p.m. that night that I checked my phone again. Shannon had somehow gotten her phone working and had left numerous texts and voicemails. At first, her messages were filled with concern, asking where I was, but as she realized the gravity of the situation, her tone shifted. "Why? Why did you do this to me? Couldn't we have talked first?" she pleaded in one message. I decided it would only upset her more, so I ignored the rest. The following day was a blur of activity. I didn't know when Shannon would return, so I had to move quickly. I bought boxes to pack up the rest of our things and rented a warehouse large enough to store everything. I also went to the bank to empty our joint account, transferring the remaining funds into my business account, which I planned to close once I was gone. But before I left, there was one more task to handle. Our small starter home, initially meant to be a place for our growing family, would now serve a very different purpose. Armed with my knowledge of construction and renovation, I began making extreme alterations to the house, though in a non-traditional manner. I gathered supplies across the city, preparing to give Shannon a visit she would never forget. Later that morning, my brother Frank arrived with his pickup truck. After discussing the situation, we spent over 5 hours loading my belongings, making 3 trips to the warehouse. By the end of the day, I had officially relocated. I kept my plans for the house and Shannon's surprise to myself, knowing Frank would try to talk me out of it if he knew what I intended. He asked me about my future plans, to which I simply replied, "I'm just leaving town and this awful marriage behind. I won't file for divorce. When she returns, I'll be gone. She can keep the house, but that's all she'll get from me." Frank shook his head. "You know this won't work. She'll hire a lawyer and track you down. Let her get the divorce and move on. Escaping will only make things worse. When she finds you, don't let emotions cloud your judgment. Get a lawyer and give her half." "No," I responded firmly. "She cheated and tried to have another man's baby, passing it off as mine. She deserves nothing, and that's exactly what she'll get. I won't divorce her. I'll leave her broke and exposed for everyone to see." Frank knew it was pointless to argue with me. I had made up my mind, and once I was set on something, it was nearly impossible to change it. He left, cautioning me to reflect on my decisions and avoid impulsive actions. Since witnessing Shannon kiss her lover, I had been mulling everything over. Now, it was time to put my plan into motion. That evening, I started working on the house, continuing into the early hours of the morning. I was uncertain when Shannon would return, but I needed to act quickly. The impending snowstorm worked in my favor. It was expected to shut down major airports, giving me more time to complete the renovations. The heavy snowfall added an extra 20 to 30 inches of accumulation, facilitating my plan. I had ignored most of Shannon's calls over the past 2 days, but I had no intention of answering now. I finally decided to answer Shannon's call, but only to gather information. "Please, baby, listen," she begged, her voice shaky with emotion. "It was a mistake, a huge, foolish mistake on my part. I never intended for it to escalate like this. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please forgive me." Her tears might have moved me once, but now they only fueled my anger and disbelief. I wanted nothing more to do with her, but I needed to maintain composure, at least for now. "Shannon," I responded, my tone steady though a subtle sadness lingered in my voice. "You've hurt me more than anyone ever has. I'm not sure if I can forgive you or trust you again. I just need to understand why. Why did you do this to us? Didn't you love me? Wasn't I enough for you?" Inside, my emotions were a storm, but I kept them in check. I wanted to shout at her, to tell her she was nothing more than a heartless stranger who had betrayed me, but I had to let her think there was a chance to reconcile. "Baby, please, let me explain," Shannon begged again. "None of that meant anything. He meant nothing to me. You mean everything to me. You're my life, my everything. Please, oh God, please forgive me." I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I couldn't let this go. "Baby," I said quietly, "I loved you, but you've broken my heart. I don't know if we can mend everything." Her voice trembled with desperation as she pleaded, "No, baby, we'll mend everything. Our love will be even stronger, our connection deeper. We just have to get through this. Please, can you wait until I come home so we can talk?" I let the silence linger before responding. "I'm not sure when you'll be back." "Well, there's a hitch. I don't have my passport or a plane ticket. My sister is sending me some money since all my credit cards were stolen." I couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief at how easily she moved from begging for forgiveness to demanding that I cancel her credit cards. It was remarkable how quickly her priorities shifted. "All right, I'll handle it right away," I said, keeping my voice steady. "So, when do you think you'll be back home?" I asked. "I think in a few days. I spoke with the American consulate here, and they'll issue me a new passport. Once I have it, I'll be able to book a flight. I could be with you in a couple of days, and if I catch an early flight, I'll be home by evening. Will you meet me at the airport?" she asked, her voice still holding hope. "Maybe it's better for your sister to pick you up. We can talk when you get back," I suggested, trying to distance myself, but still giving her a glimmer of hope. "Okay, baby. I love you, and I believe that if you give me a chance, we can work through this," she said, but I could hear the desperation in her voice. I responded coolly, "We'll talk, and then we'll see. No guarantees." As soon as I hung up, I felt a rush of emotions. I knew exactly what needed to be done next. With Shannon away for a few more days, I had time to wrap things up on my end before leaving town for good. I sold my work truck and bought a new one, used but reliable, and registered it under a friend's name to further distance myself from any ties to her. I also began informing my employees that I was shutting down the business due to my impending divorce. It was tough to do, but they needed an explanation. The next step was reaching out to an old college buddy who now lived in Colorado. We had discussed starting a business together years ago, and now seemed like the right time. He was surprised by my situation with Shannon, recalling us as the perfect couple back when we were dating. I asked him if he needed an assistant, and to my surprise, he offered me a position without hesitation. The growing workload due to changes in marijuana laws meant steady employment, and it was the fresh start I needed. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, and with each call, each decision, I was taking control back. The life Shannon had built with Anthony, along with her betrayal, was over, and it was time for me to rebuild. I requested an informal arrangement to make sure Shannon couldn't trace my whereabouts or access any funds. Everything was in place, and all that remained was for me to leave. Shannon continued to call me every day, pleading for forgiveness and professing her undying love. She gave me constant updates, promising that when she returned, she would be devoted to me for life. I couldn't listen to it anymore. The day before her return, I packed my new truck with all of my belongings, leaving only Shannon's things or items I deemed of no value to me behind. I made sure to depart early in the morning, aiming to slip out of the city unnoticed. I asked my neighbor to record Shannon's arrival as a favor, promising to alert him when she got home, hinting at a surprise. Unaware of the marital conflict, he cheerfully agreed to help and awaited my call. By the time I reached my friend's house in Colorado after a 2-day journey, I knew Shannon would already be home. On the road, I felt more serene than I had the week before. My anger from seeing Shannon and Anthony together was fading, and I was starting to pull myself out of the pit I'd been in. At noon, Shannon called, frantic. The house had collapsed. It just caved in on itself. It must have been the snow, she said, her voice shaky. I barely put the key in the lock when suddenly there was this loud crash, and the roof just collapsed. I tried to remain calm and cheerful in my response. Don't worry, Shannon. I'm sure your parents are still waiting for you. As for me, I've taken other measures. Her anger flared. What do you mean? Our house is destroyed. How can you be so cheerful? I smiled coldly. Well, Shannon, the house didn't just collapse on its own. I had a hand in it. I rigged it so that when you unlocked the door, the house would fall. I installed temporary bracing in the basement and used a chainsaw to cut through the nails in the floor. The lock was connected to a winch, and when you turned the key, it triggered the collapse. Our house didn't collapse due to snow, Shannon. It collapsed because of me, just like our marriage did. Best of luck finding a new home. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear her breath quickening with shock and rage. I hung up, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction. I reset my phone and called my neighbor. Stu, you won't believe what just happened. Our house collapsed, probably because of the snow. I told him, though I knew the truth. I've got it all on tape and luckily, Shannon's okay. She was trying to open the door when it happened, and bam, the whole thing fell in. I'll need you to send me that video when you can. After hanging up, I powered off my phone and continued my drive. This was the beginning of my new life. Nearly 3 years have passed since that day, and I've established a comfortable life for myself here in Colorado. I keep in touch with a few friends back in Minnesota, staying informed about what's going on. I've avoided direct contact with my family, as I'm certain they'd reveal my whereabouts to Shannon. As for Shannon, it seems she got what she wanted. She became pregnant with Anthony's child. At first, she insisted the baby was mine, painting me as a neglectful father who fled. Tragically, even my own mother believed her. To resolve the matter, I reached out to a friend who contacted my brother and arranged a DNA test for the baby. We compared the results with my brother's DNA. If I was the father, there would be a match. If not, there would be no resemblance. The results were a shock. There was no match. Shannon was exposed, and my mother, horrified by the revelation, expelled her from the house. She vehemently denounced her and the illegitimate child. As for Anthony, it seems he suffered severe injuries at the resort from the ex-husbands of the women he'd been involved with. He spent over a week in the hospital before returning home. Rumor has it that he fled town afterward, and some say he may be impotent now, making his days of promiscuity come to an end. As for me, I'm at peace now. I finally have control of my life again. I've learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't in fighting or hurting others. It's in moving on and rebuilding, better than before. How far is too far when it comes to revenge? Would you go to extreme lengths to expose a betrayal? Or would you walk away and seek peace? What would you do if you discovered your partner was planning to start a family with someone else? How do you cope when your life falls apart? And how far would you go to ensure that the truth is revealed? Would you still try to salvage a relationship after knowing the devastating truth? Or would you choose to completely sever ties?